And there is no sign this morning of AirAsia Flight 8501, more than 36 hours after it disappeared. The search from the air is suspended for the night, but ships are still looking in spite of what is some bad weather in the area.
There were 155 passengers and 7 crew members aboard that flight from Indonesia to Singapore. Officials say they assume the 6-year-old Airbus A320 crashed into the Java Sea. Elizabeth Palmer is following the investigation from London. Liz, good morning again.
Good morning. Yes, as Nora mentioned, night has now fallen on the search area and the planes have returned to base. But the ships are still out there, including fishing boats and warships. They're combing that area of the Java Sea just east of Indonesia. The Indonesian Navy has said that oil slicks spotted earlier have proven not to be from the missing plane. But some vessels are still looking for debris that had been reported floating in the presumed crash area. The head of Indonesia's search and rescue operations says his working hypothesis is that the plane is at the bottom of the sea. But specialized equipment will be hunting for the electronic signals that are coming from the plane's black box, wherever it is, in an area of the ocean that is shallow and relatively accessible. Vanita?
Elizabeth, thank you. CBS News travel editor Peter Greenberg is with us this morning. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
So when I initially heard that there was a change in altitude, I thought, well, that seems odd that he requested that he could go higher and they said no. But you're saying this is actually not that uncommon.
It happens hundreds of times a day when airline pilots ask for a change in altitude for air traffic controllers, and it's denied because there's other traffic in the area. It's not an unusual situation.
Could severe weather take down a plane this size?
Well, it all depends on your definition of the word severe. Every pilot has their weather radar in the cockpit. It's a color screen, it's color-coded, and anytime you see big blotches of red, every pilot knows, don't go there. And see, he was actually asking for another altitude because he probably saw that, but he's seeing it 100 miles out. So he has time to get around it. Remember, he asked for 2 things, a route change and an altitude change. And he may have deviated the route, but remember, there's clear air turbulence as well. He may have flown into that.
Can we talk a little bit about this airline, AirAsia, and Tony Fernandez? So he bought the name for this airline in 1991 for, what, 35 cents?
Yeah.
They've been flying for 18 years now, a low-cost carrier.
Great reputation for safety. They got a great reputation for maintenance. He's a good guy. I mean, the guy is sort of like the Richard Branson of Asia.
He's a celebrity there.
He is, and he's up front right now. I mean, he held a press conference right away. He did it himself. There are some lessons learned from MH370 in terms of how not to deal with information, which I think he's applying.
You know, I think still one of the big questions we have is how does a plane this size just disappear? How is it that there is not tracking of these flights?
That's the key here. I can't rent a car today without the agency knowing where I'm driving and how fast I'm going.
Or any of us with a smartphone.
Exactly. The lessons from MH370 were very clear, and the airline executives discussed it back in June in their annual meeting. You need live 24/7 data and voice streaming to the cloud. That would have solved a lot of problems, because where this plane is in a dead zone. Deborah Hirschman talked about it earlier today.
What do you mean dead zone?
It's not really tracked by anybody in terms of real time. You can get on the radio, but that doesn't tell you very much. There's nothing going on out there. You're over sea.
But
right?
Does that mean if there was pinging? Because we heard so much about pinging in some of these previous...
Pinging is difficult, and it's a different situation. What pinging is if they can find the ELT, the emergency locator transmitter of this plane, assuming it is resting on the floor of the ocean, the depth of the water allows them to hear it as sonar. They have to get within 5 or 6 miles to hear it, and there's a limited time because of battery life. We have a better chance of doing that in this situation, if it really is where they say it is, than we did with MH370, because they can actually narrow the search.
We now have 3 airline disasters in that part of the world in the past year. Significant, Deborah Hirschman said, are maybe unprecedented. Right. How many of these dead zones are there where there isn't radar tracking?
More than you can imagine.
Really?
Look at Air France Flight 4470. He was flying from Sao Paulo to Paris. And from Rio to Paris, and over most of that area, it's a dead zone. It's not tracked. But if you had live streaming of voice and data, you'd know exactly where they were, how they were talking, what they were thinking.
Certainly seems like it's time for live streaming. Peter, thank you so much.
It's not that we don't have the technology.
Right.
It's there. We need to implement it.
Thank you. Well, in just a few minutes, Peter will answer your questions about Flight 8501 on our Facebook page. Visit facebook.com/CBS This Morning to join the discussion.